Newsworks in cooperation with Eau Claire County. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
Supervisors, it is now 7 o'clock. I call to order this regular and somewhat irregular meeting of the County Board of Supervisors on this Tuesday, May the 19th. The first item is honoring of the flag. We'll do that separately first. So please unmute your microphones. Wait till you're all unmuted. Okay. Supervisors, together we'll recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America
and
and
to
to the republic for which it stands,
under God,
one
indivisible,
nation,
God, justice for all,
indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
Oh, that was awful.
It was, but it was complete. Thank you. A moment of reflection this evening is by Supervisor Chilson. Supervisors, please mute your microphones, except for Supervisor Chilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we approach Memorial Day, our reflection tonight will be on freedom. You'll have to bear with me for a minute, a little bit as I read this. I am reading a letter that came into my possession. It's from 2 Eau Claire residents. It is from Miriam Carr, who was a scientist on the Manhattan Project, to her husband, Frank Carr, Company D, 10th Infantry. The letter is dated May 8th, 1945 at 7:30 p.m. Dearest Frank, today marks another milestone in world history and in our short lives. VE Day was celebrated with some sobriety here in Washington, where it marks another step towards the final military end we're all pulling for. I am going to church at 8:30 tonight. I have such hope that we will be together by late summer and that you'll have your 30-day furlough. Oh dear, we are so very lucky. Yet there are pockets of resistance today. Only 10 minutes ago did the Russians announce the surrender, or they've still been fighting. I hope that at last you and all Patton's men have met the final wave of resistance. We've waited so long that it's hard to believe that after 7 months it has come true. We had a very nice time this weekend. Robert does love his helmet. I brought that paper inside it to work, where we've been translating it. It sure is a piece of gross overstatement. E.g., the Battle of the Solomons, which reports the USA lost 58,000 men and 113 battleships and smaller vessels. Some bunch of propaganda. Last night I received a letter written March 6th. Maybe that is why your mother hasn't heard since March 6th. She was very upset, I guess, mostly annoyed about it. You were tired when you wrote on 3/7. Someday when you're tired, you can rest your head and I'll stroke your forehead until you are soothed to sleep. I'll enjoy it as much as you. Good night, dearest. God bless you and bring you home soon from a job well done. God has been exceedingly kind to us. All my love, Miriam. On the back of the envelope that it was sent, Miriam wrote on there, the Statue of Liberty was again lit tonight. And again, this letter was dated May 8th, 1945.
Thank you, Supervisor Chilson. At this point, I'll ask our county clerk to call the roll. Supervisors, please unmute as your name is called.
Gibson?
Here.
McKinney? Knight, Pagonis,
Here.
Anton, Silk, Chilson,
Here.
Stelgis,
Here.
Maury, Coffee,
Here.
Bates, Russell,
Here.
Gatlin,
Present.
Smyer,
Here,
Neiman, Dunning,
Here.
Wilkie,
Here.
Anderson, Beckfield,
Here.
Schneider,
Here.
Leary,
Here.
DeLuca,
Here.
Jansen,
Here.
Schroffnagel,
Here.
Roberts,
Here.
Frank,
Here.
Christofferson.
Present.
Again, just because of how we're meeting, I'm going to clarify who I do not have. I do not have Supervisor Anton or Supervisor Henning. So we have 2 absent, 1 vacancy, and 26 present.
thank you. Before we proceed to the rest of the agenda, I want to point out a couple of things on the agenda to the supervisors. First, you'll notice under item 6, we have approval of journal of proceedings. And right below it, it really should be number 7. That's appointments. And we'll come to that. Just so you notice it's a separate item. The second correction, or you want to call it that, is that under Committee on Administration, we have a resolution recognizing our two of our colleagues who are no longer with us after the election. That really is an item coming under number 9, first reading ordinances and resolutions by members. The resolution is coming from the chair and not from the committee. And at that time, I'll explain what happened there. And finally, I hope you notice at the end of the agenda, we have a county board supervisors beginning a work session for the strategic plan. That will be about a half an hour in length. And when we are in that particular section, I will call for a suspension of the rules. And at the conclusion of that session on strategic plan, I will do the official adjournment. So we will now proceed next to the approval of the Journal of Proceedings from May the 5th, 2020. I hope supervisors remember how to make a motion. We're not doing it by voice. I hope you remember the instructions. So could I have a motion to approve the Journal of Proceedings? I'll wait until that comes through.
Supervisor Maury,
Motion by Supervisor Maury,
seconded by Supervisor Jansen.
second by Jansen. Thank you very much. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to the Journal of Proceedings? Okay. If not, I'm going to ask you all to unmute again, and we will do this by voice vote. So it's much easier. I think you are prepared. All those in favor of the approval of the Journal of Proceedings, by saying aye.
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 Thank you. Those opposed by nays. I hear no nays. Thank you. The approval is unanimous. The next item on our agenda is the appointment to District 16. I have appointed Chris Hambuck Boyle to fill the vacant County Board Supervisor District 16 seat. And the chair looks for motion to confirm that appointment.
Schneider by voice.
Schneider by voice makes the motion. Second?
Second by Bates.
Okay. let's see. I really think, I don't want to do this by voice vote. I think it's an important thing. So, can we do this? Can you set this up for a vote, Samantha?
Yes, give me 1 second.
We're stuck.
I'm stuck. Okay, there it is. Supervisors, please vote.
Can't hear Bixmeyer, and no one else is moving.
If you're experiencing a video problem, it's probably your computer or your server. How are we doing, Samantha?
I have 23 completed, waiting on 1, which is in progress, and 1 has not started yet.
Supervisor Schneider will accept her voice vote.
She's completed hers.
All right.
Supervisors, I have 2 in progress, so just make sure you hit submit up in the upper right-hand corner. And I apologize, Chair Smyer, I did not click the right button. However, we have unanimous yes.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'm requesting that the county clerk administer the oath to Chris Humble-Boyle, who is physically in the room just outside the county boardroom. So are we ready? Supervisor,
Can you hear me? Chair
Yes.
Smyer, this is Janet. Okay. I'm ready if you're ready.
We're ready. We can see you.
Please raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Chris Humble,
I'm
Having been
getting,
appointed to the office of Eau Claire County Supervisor, District 16,
having been appointed to the office of Eau Claire County Supervisor, District 16,
swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of said office to the best of your ability.
and will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Welcome to the board.
Now you go back.
Supervisor, a little applause would be good.
Yay!
Supervisor Boyle. You are now officially seated as supervisor for District 16. The next item on our agenda is public comment. Do we have public comment?
We have no public comment.
You're muted, Samantha. We can't hear you.
You hear me?
Now I can.
We have no public comment.
All right, thank you. The next item is reports to the county board under 104.320, beginning with an oral report from Finance Director Norb Kirk on the first quarter financials. Norb?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are a number of quarterly financial reports in the package, and no, we're not going to walk through all the reports. I just want to walk through the 2 PowerPoint slides and just kind of give a high-level view. I'd like to start off, though, by thanking Supervisor Neiman for finding an error in my director's report. So I do appreciate that. I will direct you to the last page in the director's report where in the expenditures for the total percent of budget spent for the first quarter, the table said 44%, it's 16%. So I appreciate that. So I want to make sure to note that correction.
I was totally amazed.
No, I appreciate that. And you had some other good questions too. So I appreciate that. So, so going to the first quarter financials, you know, the first quarter, if you look at the financials, the county was really not impacted by COVID-19. For all practical purposes, if we didn't have COVID-19 and you looked at the first quarter financials, you'd feel actually relatively good about things, but we all know better than to think that. We certainly will, I believe, start to see that impact in Q2 financials, you know, as early as April. You know, some of the orders that were in place and stuff didn't happen until the very end of March, so we really didn't see an appreciable change in the overall financials. The second bullet, you know, kind of talks about the general fund because, again, we like to talk or spend a fair amount of time talking about the general fund, and that will become increasingly important as we move through this year. And in particular, when we had the last meeting and we talked about the financing arrangement we were looking to do with a private placement and how we didn't get the bid we were looking for. And so now we're heading down into the securities market. We will be having a meeting with Moody's the first week of June, and undoubtedly they will be talking about the general fund balance. So, but from a general fund balance perspective or general fund results for Q1, you know, revenue was a little bit higher than it was from a year ago. The majority of that variance is really the sales tax collection timing. In 2019, that first sales tax that was collected for the month of January that we would typically receive in March wasn't receipted in March. So really no sales tax kind of showed up in Q1 of 19, where in Q1 of 20 it actually did. So that's the majority of the difference between the two. On the expenditure side, we were a little bit lower, kind of year on year. Expenditures were 21% of the budget compared to 22.3 a year ago. So what we did see was revenue, you know, slightly higher from a year ago and expenditures slightly lower. So again, absent any COVID impact, we would say, you know, the first quarter was pretty good. I mean, typically revenues are, you know, lag a little bit, as we've talked about, because if nothing else, we typically, because of grants and things, expend money before we get the revenue. So the sales tax payments, as are, again, just to remind people, they lag 2 months. So the only sales tax payment that we received in the first quarter would be for January. It just happened to be the largest January collection that we've had in terms of sales tax. So we're starting off the year at least on a positive note for sales tax. So the January payment was the highest amount. The February payment that we received in April, when you add January and February together, that's actually the highest combined 2 months total we've had in sales tax. So again, some of the leading indicators for the beginning of this fiscal year are not indicative of what we are going to expect to see going forward. We are seeing that the sales tax, the latest estimate from Forward Analytics, they now say the high side of our potential decrease in sales tax for this year is 1.7 million. That's in reference to before I had quoted that sales tax would be down 1 million to 1.4. We'd be now looking at somewhere between 1 million and 1.7 million. The last bullet on that first page is the vehicle registration fees were kind of relatively flat, and we would expect that to be relatively flat kind of year on year. So on the second page, we start to talk about some of the expenditures at a high level. You know, the personnel expenditures were relatively comparable to what they were in the first quarter a year ago. The total personnel expenditures amounted to a little over $10 million, which is about 19% of the county budget. Again, the reason that that percentage is typically lower is at any point in time, the county has somewhere between 30 to 40 or so vacant positions. And so the county had, just about 30 vacant positions at the end of the quarter, which that salary on an annualized basis would be about $1.2 million. So that's typically the biggest reason why you wouldn't see us be necessarily at 25% for the year. On a more granular level, the overtime expenditures were down quite significantly from what they were in 2019. But if you recall, we had a relatively bad winter, and John in the highway department incurred quite a bit of overtime a year ago compared to this past year here. So Q1 to 20 versus Q1 of 19, we definitely saw that impact, and the overtime incurred is lower. Supplies and services were also down significantly year to year, and that was also related primarily to the highway, because it's kind of a double-edged sword. The highway didn't incur as much of some of the winter costs, but they didn't get as much revenue because they couldn't necessarily charge out for some of the services, but correspondingly, they also didn't have as many expenses or supplies to incur as well. So that kind of went hand in hand. When you look at the director's report, there's a section in that report that references the economic indicators. Those are indicators we look at to get a relative feel for what's going on in terms of the economy, and sometimes those translate into fiscal results. Ironically, again, if you look at the indicators, every one of the indicators for the first quarter was positive. Once again, probably not indicative of what we're going to see as we move through the year. Although I would point out there are a couple of those indicators, particularly some of the real estate transfer taxes, the register of deeds, zoning and permits. I mean, we are seeing activity certainly that is increased in terms of refinancing, in terms of taking out of permits to do new builds and etc. So again, that probably will continue at least for some period of time. But the last indicator on there was interest earned on investments. That was a positive indicator in Q1, but we've already seen that start to decline in Q2 as interest rates have really kind of fallen off. So I would expect that some of those leading indicators will start to go the other way in Q2. And last but certainly not least, as a result of all this, lower expenditures, a little bit higher revenue, we actually saw our cash position increase from what it was a year ago by approximately $3 million. So that's an also very good sign. Again, we will likely need to continue to watch that cash balance as we move through the year, as we do start to see some of the impacts of some of the loss of some of the revenues that we're expecting based on kind of the forecast. So that's basically what I wanted to present. I don't know if there's any questions.
The chair requests that you raise your hand if you wish to ask a question. And I'm monitoring that. Are there any questions for Norm? With the exception of Supervisor Schneider, who may jump in at any time. I see no questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Norm. The next item is a general update from Administrator Schaaf.
Thank you and good evening. The focus of the work in the last month has continued to be working on a number of different initiatives that are formulated around the county response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Incident Command and the EOC continue to function. Many of you participate in watching the 3:30 daily updates from our Incident Command and the Incident Commander, Lisa Giese, our Public Health Director. I would like to remind you that the best location for information that you would like to either review or find specific information on is actually linked on our website. We actually have the COVID-19, and from that location, you can find a link to the regular public health updates with information on a daily basis, as well as links to other activities. The county, along with the city of Eau Claire and the city of Altoona, and many local partners have worked to begin an economic recovery task force being chaired by Mark Fannis and Greg Moore that is up and running and is providing input and information to our business community across multiple sectors. And they have been meeting on a daily basis, putting information out to help our community recover quickly and safely. That information also is linked in the same location under the coronavirus information page. So you can find information there if you're looking for that. There are those who have asked about participating in that recovery effort, and there is actually a spot on that web page where you can indicate your desire to participate if you would like to. At the county level, of course, we have a number of different task forces that are working. I had already mentioned Incident Command and the Emergency Operations Center, and we are still redeploying some of our staff from other areas into not only Incident Command and the emergency operations, but also in direct COVID response as part of the operations of the Emergency Operations Center. So, for instance, an example of that would be when we are required to either quarantine or offer isolation services. Our Department of Human Services staff have been providing the follow-up work with that and providing the on-site, boots on the ground individuals that are helping to supervise those individuals. So we are continuing to be responsive and to respond to what is happening in our community. We also have a reopening task force that is looking not only at reopening county government, but also working with all of our governmental partners in identifying best practices for reopening. The general philosophical approach that we will be taking in county government is to put the safety of our citizens and staff as a first priority. And we are going to continue to minimize, to the extent that we can, the traffic coming through our government center. It has been working well to have individuals request meetings in advance or appointments, and also using some of our online tools, we've still been able to meet the needs of the constituency. So we will continue to do that, as well as working with a task force. Last week, we received guidance from the state regarding the courts reopening, and Judge Schumacher has requested that we put together a subgroup or a sub-task force that will be aligned with the Criminal Justice Collaborating Council to identify all the needed adjustments in court processing and court proceedings to ensure that, again, we maintain the safety and well-being of all of those who are accessing that service. And so we'll continue to work on those items. Also this week, the County Government Operations Task Force met briefly to identify date, time, and agenda items for their next meeting. The next meeting will be coming up on Wednesday, May 27th at 1:00 p.m. There will be a WebEx that will go out so that anyone who is interested in participating or listening to that meeting may do so. And the meetings will be held bi-weekly, and we'll be posting the information that is shared at those meetings, not only in the form of minutes, but also in any materials that are part of that, to the website, as well as providing a regular update to the Board of Supervisors. That is all I have this evening, Chair.
Thank you. Supervisors, are there any questions? Please raise your hand. I'm scanning that.
Schneider,
Go ahead, Supervisor Schneider.
two-part question. When does our emergency declaration end? And do we need to do anything to re-up that in order to be able to keep functioning by WebEx?
So the emergency declaration at this point has expired. The pandemic, however, has not. And so we don't need to actually renew the emergency declaration for the purpose of continuing to meet via WebEx with our board for this time. And I think that long-term other events that would trigger that, I do recall that you had requested the board consider some changes with meeting attendance via WebEx and remotely. And so I leave that to our corporation counsel as well as chair to agendize and to discuss with the Committee on Administration.
This is Tim Sullivan. Supervisor Schneider, I did get your email today. I was planning on drafting a response to it tomorrow, and I'll explain the particulars about public meetings and the ability to do this by WebEx and any preferences with regards to personal meetings.
Thank you. Supervisor Schneider? Are you
Yes.
done? Okay.
That answered my question.
Thank you. I see no other hands raised. The next item is our agenda on the written reports. The first, ordinarily when we do the scholarship awards, we have the recipients and their parents with us in a formal presentation. I'm assuming that because of the format we're in now, we're simply notifying you in written report and you have a copy of all the awards with pictures of the recipients. Other items on the written report, the April 20 payments over $10,000, the 2020 contingency fund report, and trended personnel costs. Are there any questions arising from the written reports? See none. Thank you. Next on our agenda would be under item 9, where I moved the resolution, file number 25.
Recognizing and commending and thanking Eau Claire County Board Supervisors upon their dedicated years of service.
I'm bringing this forward as chair and in this section, and this would require not only a motion and a second, but we'd have to have a motion to suspend the rules in order to consider a resolution brought by a member. So I will look first for a motion and a second of the file.
Motion by Supervisor Wilkie.
Supervisor Wilkie moves.
Seconded by Supervisor Crunk.
Second by Supervisor Crunk. At this point, in order to proceed, I believe we need to have a motion to suspend the rules to permit us to vote on this resolution in this meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So the chair looks for a motion to suspend the rules.
Schneider.
Schneider moves.
Seconded by Supervisor Jansen.
Second by Supervisor Jansen. All those in favor of suspending the rules, I'm going to do this by a voice vote. Please unmute your microphones. Please unmute. Thank you. All those in favor of suspending the rules in order to vote, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed by nay. Here no nays. I'm assuming it is a yes vote. And then we will proceed to the resolution itself. This resolution is coming forward actually a bit late, thanks to my failure to act on it. It would be important to recognize the service of the 2 members who have left the board. Are there any questions or is there any discussion of this resolution? I see no hands raised. Then I believe we can do this also by voice vote. So please unmute. Okay. Those in favor of approval of File 25, recognizing, commending, and thanking Eau Claire County Board Supervisors upon their dedicated years of service. Please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed by nay. I hear no nays. It is a unanimous vote. Thank you for your patience with that, supervisors. Next item on our agenda from the Committee on Planning and Development, file number 15. Janet?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town of Washington.
Motion?
So moved.
No voice motion, Supervisor Bates.
Motion by Supervisor Gatlin.
Supervisor Gatlin moves.
Seconded by Supervisor Crock.
Second by Supervisor Crop. This is an ordinance change. We'll vote on this in the next meeting. Am I correct, Tim? No?
No, Nick, this has already been to planning development. It's already here for reading, first reading once already.
Oh, I apologize. I see the number 2 there. So, explanation. Again, by Supervisor Gibson.
Okay, this request was to rezone 1.4 acres of land owned by the applicant from A2RH agriculture residential rural homes districts to the C1 neighborhood business district to allow for a 3-unit multifamily residential development. The Eau Claire County and the town of Washington's future land use maps include the property in the rural commercial RC planning area. The staff concluded that the proposed C1 zoning district is consistent with the intent and description and the applicable policies of the Eau Claire County Comprehensive Plan. And proposed multifamily residential development is compatible with the surrounding land uses. This was acted on by the town of Washington board. They considered this rezoning and recommended approval 5-0. The Eau Claire County Committee on Planning Development conducted their public hearing on a vote of 5 in favor and 0 against. The committee recommended approval.
Thank you. Are there any questions regarding this file? I see no hands raised. Let's do this by Samantha, set up a vote for this, please. Samantha? Are you there?
Should be live on your screen, Chair Smyer.
Yes.
On your screen.
Sorry? Oh. We have 26 yes.
That would be 27 with Supervisor Schneider.
Oh, okay. And we have 2 absent, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The vote is unanimous. Thank you, supervisors. The next item on our agenda, also from the Committee on Planning and Development, file number 14.
Amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town of Pleasant Valley.
Thank you. Motion, please.
Motion from Supervisor Leary,
Motion by Supervisor Leary,
seconded by Supervisor Maury.
second by Supervisor Maury. Okay. Explanation, Supervisor Gibson.
Yeah, this request was to rezone 2.3 acres of land from the AP Agriculture District to the A2 Agriculture District to allow the applicant to divide the existing residents from the agriculture property. The Eau Claire County and the town of Pleasant Valley's future land use maps include the property in the rural lands planning area. Staff finds that the proposed rezoning request substantially conforms with the Eau Claire County Comprehensive Plan. The town of Pleasant Valley, they considered this rezoning request at their meeting and recommended approval 3-0. The committee, the Eau Claire County Committee in Planning and Development, conducted their required public hearing on a vote of 4-1, 4 in favor and 1 against. The committee recommends approval of the rezoning.
Thank you, Supervisor Gibson. I see 2 hands raised. I'm sorry, 3 hands raised. First, Supervisor DeLuca. You have to unmute. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask a question. I see in the packet that 2 people from the public attended and spoke against the rezoning, and I was just wondering if you could share what their concerns were.
Supervisor Gibson.
I'm trying to remember. I don't even remember anybody from the public speaking on this one.
I remember one of the things that was a concern was the shape of the lot.
Oh, the shape
and
of, yeah, it was
the
just the shape of the lot.
driveway,
You're right.
and the concern about the driveway and that someone had owned the
Yep.
property and gotten hit on that busy road. So they were concerned of that the lot line was going to make them only be able to use that driveway that was not, the concern was that it was not safe and that someone might hit them and get hit because of the location of that driveway.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is correct. I remember that now. Also, too, I mean, once this has also got to go through the highway committee to look at where the driveway can come in. Those folks weren't necessarily opposing the rezoning part of this. They were more concerned about where that driveway was going to be. The existing driveway was shut down, and but they have a possible easement so that they could move that driveway to still allow entrance, but not on the original driveway.
Thank you. Supervisor DeLuca, please lower your hand. Supervisor Dunning.
No comments.
Lower your hand, please. Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding this file? Oh, sorry. Supervisor Bates. Supervisor Bates? I think you're muted, Supervisor Bates.
I have no other questions.
Okay. Please lower your hand. Did you put your hand up again? Losing track of these things. Supervisor Dunning, did you have your hand up?
No.
Well, then take it down. Thank you. Apologies. Appears that we're ready to vote on file 14. Samantha, please set up the vote. Supervisor Schneider, have you given your vote?
I have.
Thank you.
Chair Smyer, I apologize. My screen is not sharing, but we have 25 yes, 1 no.
Okay. And we should have 27, shouldn't we? Samantha?
Yeah.
Supervisor Pagonis did not vote.
You're muted, Stella. You're still muted.
Tried to vote, and when I hit it, it disappeared. So I thought I was voting, but it didn't work. So I apologize for that.
Well, we'll take your voice vote then.
Yeah, it was an aye.
Okay, thank you. Are we at 27 then, Samantha?
Yes, we would be.
Okay. So the vote, I think, is 26 to 1, and the file passes. Thank you. The next item on our agenda comes from the Committee on Finance and Budget, File 9.
Authorizing carry forward of funds from 2019 budget into 2020 budget.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Motion by Supervisor Jansen,
Supervisor Jansen moves,
seconded by Supervisor Crunk.
second by Supervisor Cronk. Thank you. Explanation, Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Currently, we have a policy that if certain funds, primarily capital funds or donations, were not expended in a particular calendar year, they can be moved to the forthcoming calendar year. So what you have before you is a list in very small print of those funds that were not spent in the 2019 fiscal year and have been asked to move forward to 2020. The vast majority of them are capital related. There are a few that are that were donations, and I'm not exactly sure why airport is on the list because it's an enterprise fund and carries a fund balance. And there are some from the sheriff that are non-lapsing anyway, so they would have their own fund balance. But this is a relatively complete list of all of those funds from 2019 that were not expended that are being asked to be carried forward to 2020.
Thank you, Supervisor Pagonis. I see your hand is raised. You may want to take your hand down. Other questions regarding this file? Supervisor Bates, I see your hand up.
Yes. I wanted to be sure that the monies that are being transferred over, that our donations stay, they don't go into the general fund.
Correct.
That they stay as different than the segregated account.
Supervisor Pagonis, can you respond to that?
Yes, I certainly can. The point behind this exact carryover is to have the funding, whether it be capital or donation, to remain with the particular line item it was originally designated for. So, for example, if you're addressing there's 3 carryovers for the treatment courts, all 3 of them remain within the treatment courts because they're donations specific to the treatment courts. So the whole point behind the carryover is that none of these would revert to a general fund, but they stay with their program.
Thank you for that information.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Supervisor Bates and Supervisor Pagonis. I see no other hands raised. Samantha, please set up the vote. Thank you.
27 yeses.
27 yes. That is a unanimous vote. Thank you. The next item is appointments. The chair has made 3 appointments to the Land Conservation Committee. I'm sorry, all 3 are reappointments to the Land Conservation Committee, Ricky Strauch and Gloria Adams, and to the Housing Authority, Philip Swanhorst. I think that we can handle all 3 of these at the same time. The chair looks for a motion to approve the appointments.
Motion from Supervisor Wilkie,
Motion by Wilkie,
seconded by Supervisor DeLuca.
second by Supervisor DeLuca. Are there any questions? Is there any discussion regarding these appointments? I see no hands raised. So Samantha, please set up the vote on this.
Give me just 1 second on this one. I have to create it.
Okay.
I have 2 supervisors who have not started yet.
Supervisor, just a reminder to click the submit button. Yeah, okay. 26 yes and
27 yeses.
with Supervisor Stager. Okay. Thank you very much, supervisors. We are done with that. At this point in the meeting, we're going to move to a discussion with Rob Crowith. Rob, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me and see me?
I can hear you. Can't see you yet. There you are. Okay.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we proceed, we have up until now in the meeting strictly followed Robert's rules and the county rules. At this point, the chair would look for a motion to suspend the rules, which would permit us to have a free-flowing conversation. And during this conversation, I will ask all of you to unmute so that we can have a free-flowing conversation. And when we've reached the end, I will do a formal adjournment of the meeting. So the chair looks for a motion to suspend the rules.
I have a motion from Supervisor Gatlin and a second from Supervisor Neiman.
Okay, moved by Gatlin, second by Neiman. This is not a debatable point. All those in favor, we're not going to take let's do a voice vote. So unmute, please. Thank you. Supervisor Maury. Okay. All those in favor of suspending the rules indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed by nay.
Yes. Good. Is that okay?
Thank you. I hear no nays. So we are now in a conversation which will be led by Rob. Rob, you're on.
Well, great. Thank you, everyone. It's great to be back with you, if not in person through this way. My name is Rob Carwath. I am a consultant. I've been working with the county on the strategic plan for the last few months. My business is called North Coast Communications. It's based in Duluth and outside of Kansas City. And I'm talking with you from Kansas City tonight. So maybe we'll just start with a little bit of beginning. what do we mean when we are talking about a strategic plan? What's the value of a strategic plan? I often like to say a strategic plan is kind of what you want to be when you grow up. It's what your long-term goals are, what's really important, and then how will you get there. It's made up of your critical priorities. There are lots of places for county government to get involved and to do work, noble and meaningful work. But what are the real priorities in important places, especially now where we want to be focused? We need priorities now because so much is in flux. Our lives are in flux, the lives of our neighbors and the people who call Eau Claire County home are in flux all around the world. We're feeling that. And so priorities help us focus on what's really, really important. So I think it's a credit to the county that engaged in strategic planning. Not everyone does it. It is as unfortunate as COVID is right now. It's fortunate that we're in the midst of strategic planning while this is happening, because we can factor that into that long-term planning and kind of figure out where can we really put our resources to have the most impact. So what was our process? We started where it matters. We started with the people of Eau Claire County, our neighbors, folks who call this community home. We did 5 sessions in early March, just days before the COVID-19 shutdown, and we met with dozens of people who joined us in the city of Eau Claire and in other venues around county, small communities, little gatherings. We had a couple of fairly large gatherings too. Many of you joined us for those, and I want to thank you for being part of that. We asked the people who came to those meetings, what matters to you? What's special? What do we need to make sure we take good care of in Eau Claire County? But at the same time, what can we do better? What are your goals and dreams for Eau Claire County, and how can we achieve those? Little did we know how much we would need that priority setting just a few days later when the COVID-19 shutdowns began to happen and we entered into life as we know it. So as all of that was beginning to happen, we started to develop a plan, and we're deciding what to leave in and what to take out right when COVID changed all of our plans. But true to the purpose of strategic planning and the value of strategic planning, we already were setting some priorities and helping figure out what our goals were going to be. COVID changed our plan. It's fair to say that. It forced us to focus on what really, really, really matters. So maybe at one point we were headed into 3rd or 4th gear. We had to bring it down to 1st or 2nd gear. 1st gear, absolutely, in a few places, because things like stabilizing county finances really, really, really matter. They've always mattered, but they particularly matter when we can't just take that for granted anymore. So you'll see that as part of our plan. So now we're in a period of challenges. County government are facing challenges like never before. This is where the priority setting is going to make a difference.
Your voice
and with staff.
Your audio is breaking up.
Can you hear me now? A little better? No.
No.
Maybe unmute.
Right now, how's that?
Try it again. Unmute.
Well, now, can you hear me?
Yes, I think we can. Say a few words.
All right. Is that okay?
Your mouth is in advance of your voice. There's a lag in the audio.
All right. How about now? Is that a little better?
That's better.
Very.
All right. Sorry about that. So we've worked the plan through with staff. We've presented it to the Committee on Administration, and our plan is to present it to you tonight. We want to walk through the plan fairly quickly And then we want to walk through it again in a little more detail, more discussion, and getting your input at each point. After we're done tonight, we also will send you an online poll where you can have some a little more time to think about it between now and finishing that poll as you're working on that poll. And we'll ask you for feedback. That really helps us focus on the big stuff. And I guess that would be my message to you tonight. Do we have the big stuff right? You'll see other parts of the plan are really for the departments and the department heads with their people to kind of figure out and play out. Do we have the big stuff right? And that's a focus on goals. You'll see 3 of them there. 3 goals that establish where we want to be in the next 2 to 4 years. And then the objectives under those goals. So that begins the process of how we get there. And we'll ask you to focus on our goals and objectives tonight. You'll see some strategies as well, but that's, like I was saying, for the department heads and their staffs, but feel free to comment on those as well. What's the process after that? Well, we'll ask for your feedback. You'll make some adjustments. We'll send it to the department heads. It'll go back to the Committee on Administration. And our plan is to bring a strategic plan to you for approval at the June 16th meeting. I guess, especially in a COVID environment, we want to realize that a strategic plan is an active, living, breathing document. You'll go through a lot of changes in the next 2 to 4 years, and that's the period that the strategic plan will cover. That's not surprising. It would be surprising if we didn't have changes in the next 2 to 4 years. But if we've got the big stuff right, the goals and objectives, those should hold. And that's really why we want you to focus on those tonight. Goals and objectives as part of any strategic plan can help most of all by being a filter. You're going to have lots of ideas, lots of possibilities, lots of projects come up in the next 2 to 4 years. One of the best values of a strategic plan is helping you filter out the best projects that come up and keeping the county focused on the most important things. So that's what we're trying to figure out with this plan, especially tonight. So finally, I want to say a word about Speak Your Piece. This was a strategic plan process that included Speak Your Piece, the civility project, where we tried to engage people by bringing them to the table and assuring them a civil conversation, a civil environment. We know that we're going to have disagreements, but if we can do it in a civil way, we can work through it. We can come up with ideas that any one of us probably could not have come up with alone. We use Speak Your Piece in the engagement process with our public and the idea generation. We used it to put together the plan, at least as far as it is so far. We'll use it with you tonight and in the remainder of the process. And then in the next 2 to 4 years, you'll use it as you work with your community to make sure it's filtering out the best ideas and helping you get where you want to go. So, shall we put the plan up? Can we get that on the screen?
I can do it for you, but I gave you presenter role as well, so I wasn't sure if it would be easier for you to scroll as you wished.
You know, why don't we have you do it, and then I'll just kind of ask you to scroll up and down if you could.
Okay.
I think that would maybe help with just some of the bandwidth issues too.
Sure.
Right, Samantha, just tell me when you have it up. I'm not seeing it yet.
It is on its way.
There you go. Okay.
There we go. Okay. So in this strategic plan, you'll see 3 goals. And why don't we start with the first of them? The first goal is to stabilize our county finances and operations. It's an important job for county government. It's even more important in a COVID environment. We need to keep and ensure our county finances in a stable position at time of challenge. That's what's going to allow the county to do its work. And that work is more important now than ever to the stakeholders. So under this goal, you'll see 3 objectives. The first objective is to develop an operations and staffing plan that's supported by conservative revenue projections. We want to be realistic about what we're projecting. We're developing a plan for how we're running the county and we're staffing the county. Objective number 2 is to develop a financial plan that examines key data. And you'll see underneath that bullet point, we've given some examples of what key data would look like. Financial estimates as best we can make them in this environment. We want to look at our financial commitments, review the commitments that were made before COVID, and make sure that we can commit to them, we can continue with them if we need to make changes to them. And along with that, we want to take a look at capital projects that the county has had on the books for the next few years. Are these realistic? Do we think funds are available to make these happen? Do we need to make any adjustments in our capital plan as we're trying to really develop a conservative spending and revenue plan? Third objective, you can just see that a little bit there. Maybe we can scroll up a tad. There we go. We want to develop a communication plan to regularly share information with our stakeholders. When we met with the folks at the 5 meetings, we heard this over and over again. They're interested in what the county is doing. They're interested in what the county board is thinking and how it's acting, and they want to be part of that. They might not want to get involved at every decision, but they'd like more communication. And rather than take that as a challenge or something, a criticism, I think it's an invitation for you to engage them, even if it's just sharing information. Getting more engagement is almost certain when you're communicating at a higher level. A big part of that communication, we heard from them, and we just talked through at these sessions, involved explaining to our neighbors and our community what we're doing, the choices that we have to make, and some of the background and context for those choices. You, as elected officials, know, you hear all the time, why did you do this? Why couldn't you do this? And it comes down to choices. We feel that a big part of communicating and sharing with our stakeholders is educating them about some of those choices that we have to make, particularly now. So that's goal 1. I'm going to go through these other 2 goals, and then we'll come back. We'll come back and go through each of them. So goal number 2 is enhance our communities and the quality of our citizens' lives. This is kind of right at the heart of what you do in county government and why many of you are serving. We heard about this, not surprisingly, at every public session. People talked about the impact of county government on their lives and the importance of what the county does and how it affects people. So this first objective that we have under this goal, we heard at not only at every meeting that we had, but multiple times at every meeting we had. Provide and improve broadband services to rural parts of the county, places that don't have broadband service or have weak or spotty broadband service. I think we've all understood in the last 2 months the importance of this. We probably understood that beforehand, but it's just thinking about how we're meeting here tonight and how we've done business in the last 2 months. It's been even more clear to us that broadband service is a vital public utility for the people of the county, and we need to work to improve service in areas where it's not up to snuff. Eau Claire County is not alone by any stretch in this need. It's an issue in Duluth, it's an issue in rural parts of Kansas and Missouri where I am now, and one of the benefits of the fact that others are working on this is we can take a look at what they're doing, and we can seek their best practices and models as we find solutions. But I think this one has risen pretty highly to that. It was pretty high already, but it's risen even higher in the environment that we're in. Scroll up a little bit to the second page, Samantha. Objective 2 is to optimize residents' health and safety. again, right at the heart of what county government does. Health and safety work is important in a COVID environment. It's even more so as we think about what people are depending on us to do. We talk in this about making sure we have a safe community during the pandemic and assist in recovery. As we move forward, we want to provide a safe environment for our county employees and the public as they do business with us. We also want to make some progress in some areas where we need to make some progress, improving services to vulnerable and at-risk populations, including homeless individuals and those who are in need of mental health services. Objective 3 is to protect and enhance our natural resources. And to be honest with you, a few of us, as we were putting together this list right after the COVID shutdown, we asked ourselves, does this one make the list? I don't think anyone of us doubted that it was important, but at a time when we're trying to do some very basic things, do we have the resources to protect and enhance our natural resources? And we concluded that we needed to find those resources to do the work. These are some of the amenities that give Eau Claire County a strategic advantage over other places. People live in Eau Claire County because of the natural resources that are there. And if we took our eye off the ball on this one, even just by not including it in the strategic plan, our fear was that we would lose part of what is our strategic advantage. And so in taking care of the crown jewels, if you will, in our community is an important task. And so this one had to find its way onto the list. And you can see some of the areas that we talked about: quality of groundwater, access to parks and forests, carbon neutrality, and sound land decisions. And then finally, goal 3, kind of a similar situation here. Goal 3 is positioning the county for economic development. And again, we asked ourselves, in this environment, can we really afford to be doing economic development work? Is this really a focus of the county? And as most of you know, there are other agencies, the state, local governments, that do more of the private sector, higher education in some fashion. All of those areas work for economic development. The county, though,
You're breaking up again.
Right? How's that? A little better?
Better.
Okay. So, like the environment, we thought if we left this off the list, we would really be doing the county a disservice. We need to focus on economic development during and through the pandemic to make sure that when we get to the other side, we're not starting from zero. We've already worked and made progress. And this is going to be a big part of what helps us through at least the economic portion of COVID-19. We need to keep working on this, even if it's in a coordinating and a directing role, not necessarily providing direct resources that come from other places, including the state. So those are our 3 goals, supported by a number of different objectives underneath them. I think what we'd like to do is maybe just go back to the first goal and take a little time, see if we can answer your questions, either myself or some of the staff members who were part of the process. So what questions do you have on the first goal, the stabilizing county finance and operations goal?
Supervisors, please feel free to unmute your microphones to ask your questions.
Schneider, I have a bigger question. Did we do this 2 to 4 years ago, and does this look much different from that?
A lot different.
Yes, we did do this. And with the large, when you look at big picture, some of it is similar, but certainly if we look especially at the financial goals, that has changed significantly.
Could you say how it's changed?
Well, I think it has to do with overages because of the opioid epidemic and some of the other issues that we've had to face. And obviously, that's a destabilization of our budget. Maybe
So we're hitting the
budget.
budgeting harder. Would that be a fair statement?
I think you see the word conservative quite often. And obviously, that's a necessity if we're going to make it through this.
This is Rob here. I think one of the changes, I wasn't here last time this happened, but I think the engagement of the citizens and the stakeholders in sessions as the first part of the process, I think was different. It's been explained to me.
Yes, I'm remembering 2 years ago, and I'm sure community input was asked for, but I think this time with this way this was put out to the public, that we had much better public input than we probably ever have had in the past.
I respectfully disagree. I think we're having different public input. We used to have much greater attendance at our budget meetings and hearings. We also used to have, I think, a little bit more with the public input in terms of coming to meetings and telling us what's on their mind, which we all took into consideration, I think, in our committee work. One of the things that's bothered me a little bit about the whole process and how things have changed is we have a tendency to kind of just approve things by rote, and some of this is falling through the cracks. So I'm concerned about that. And the other thing is, I think a lot of our staff, as we continually decrease our staff, I think some of them are really being pushed to try and deliver because of time constraints. For example, our IS department is trying hard to keep up with issues, but sometimes they don't have the budget that they need to give us the tools we need. So these are some of the things I've been concerned about. But we used to have a survey that we sent out, and it was on our website. We heard from a lot of citizens that we had budget hearings in the summer. So we, in the last probably 2 years, have heard less in those other traditional means, but yet we had the hearing session. So it's just been different input.
And it was my observation that in my tenure is much shorter, but I observed that there was people attending those sessions that had never given input before. That was my experience.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's true, this Colleen. I think a part of it also, Robin, was as we looked at the hearings that were had, and particularly in our various departments, often they were contracting agencies that came in and talked about their budget. It wasn't as much an open discussion for the public and to voice their concerns.
Oh, and I think it's good that they had the sessions, and I think it's great that we've had the input. I'm just saying that we've had input, it's just been a little different. And as we talk in other parts of our goals and objectives about working with other partners, I think it is very important that we hear from other community partners and get their input. So,
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This is Supervisor Cronk, and I just want to make an initial comment that I was at a couple of the speaker piece sessions, and definitely appreciate the opportunity for kind of going out into the community. I know there's maybe improved ways that we can do better outreach, absolutely, to community members. But I'm always concerned, how are we reaching out or engaging the more marginalized communities? And I think we've seen, all over the news and in every article, or there's definitely a spotlight on the fact of how COVID-19, it didn't start the impacts of racial, ethnic, economic disparities, but it certainly is, if you didn't or weren't aware of it before, you certainly have to be aware of it now. So I'm not seeing anything in here about ensuring, building equity, diversity, inclusion, and how are we going to rebuild and do our strategic planning financially and operationally to ensure that we are not continuing those disparities. We're making an intentional effort to not only reduce those, but if we start to ensure we're building equity, those through generations should, help to minimize themselves. So to me, I think, yes, we always have to be mindful and intentional that that's what we're doing, is trying to reduce disparities. But at the same time, if we're building equity, that's sort of the equalizer of how to ensure that we're moving forward with all of our community members and not just some who are more willing to participate or who traditionally participate.
I think it's always been an issue to be able to reach to individuals that are struggling. And I think sometimes we may have to use partners. I had a report, as you know, at our Human Services Board meeting in regard to communication with the homeless population. And if it turns out that they don't come to us, then maybe we have to find other resources to be able to reach them, other partners that we can rely on to represent the voice that they hear.
In response to Supervisor Schneider's question as to what was happening in the past, Supervisor Leary gave a very good description of what our budget processes were and how we looked at basically what is now Objective 1 and portions of Objective 2. When it came time to looking at other plans, such as what Supervisor Bates is talking about, that was done in separate discussions based on when we were working with UW Extension, who would lead discussions on our planning process. That did not get into a lot of financial issues, so that we were basically doing our planning in two phases. One of them which was looking at programs, and the other one which was looking at finances. And this particular arrangement now blends those two processes, so we should be able to look at all of it as a large package.
I'd like to see Goal 2 broadened somehow to include Supervisor Cronk's comment about equity and diversity. I think there's potential there, but it's not stated.
So that would be, this is Rob again, so that would be, you'd like to see that maybe reflected in Goal 2?
I think so. I think that's where to go.
I do think Speak Your Piece can help in that process. The program is designed to bring people in by ensuring them a place where they can be heard, not necessarily a place where everybody's going to agree, but where they can be heard and real discussions can be had. So maybe we can work on finding a place in Goal 2 to make that clear that we want that kind of equity filter.
I think we talk about communication, don't we, in Goal 2? My memory is not 100%.
I believe you mean Goal 1's Objective 3 communication plan. share information with stakeholders, that might be a good place to put the inclusion and diversity aspect.
Yeah, I was I had my eye on that as well.
I had my eye on that.
Sharing information would go both ways somehow.
That's Supervisor Jensen.
I agree with that too, but I do think, as I was first going through the plan, in this section that was talking about health and safety under goal 2, I think that's another thing that we need to be conscious of too, because our community of color are being greatly affected by this COVID pandemic. And so, under health and safety, that is something that should be another focus, especially in the current situation.
If we could for a moment just pop back to goal 1, question I have and comment related to that. I noted the third bullet point there under strategies, streamlining of staffing. I'm trying to be sure I understand what was meant by streamlining. That, my understanding might in fact mean reducing. But I would hope that also it would mean realignment of staffing. Sometimes we're either too quick to add or delete staff. Just maybe my question is, what is meant by streamlining staffing?
Rob here again. I think what we're talking about mostly is eliminating redundancy, taking a look at the way we've always done things to make sure that those are things that we need to continue to do moving forward, even though there may have been value to some of those functions in the past. Is there as much value moving forward, and where there's not, making adjustments? It may not mean eliminating entirely, but perhaps we streamline. We talked a little bit too about partnering with some of our other units of local government, where township and county are, often working very closely. Sometimes ways that we can find efficiencies in that kind of work. And I think really emphasizing that last part where we're talking about elimination of artificial silos. So if we have,
that makes sense to me, and that's fine. But my thought being, though, along with that, which is a little bit different, maybe, is that we ought to be looking closely at also how we align our staff, realigning them, that we aren't in individual silos, that we look at job descriptions in such a way that we might be able to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of our current staffing pattern, and maybe thereby streamlining it, less staff. But I just was in favor of the term realigning.
Good suggestion. Thank you.
I have a tendency to believe you could also be thinking, if you're going to try to cover all of the responsibilities that need to be tended to, you may have to think about the possibility of cross-training individuals so that basically they can step into cover a particular position if they need to. And that is also a form of streamlining.
Good point. Yes, thank you. Any other thoughts on goal 1? I know we've kind of gone into goal 2 a little bit, but
I do. This is Chris. I was wondering, and I'm new, so this is just a question I had. Is the discussion around the connection and collaboration with other governmental bodies when it comes up with the question about equity? How much does our marginalized groups? Are there ever goals that are aligned with the school district and the city?
Maybe I can answer that. Right now, it's not been active, but we had a shared services committee that actually involved the school district, the city of Eau Claire, and the county of Eau Claire. And we'd even thought about expanding that to include Altoona. And they really set up initially the goals determined by just looking at the data, what we could possibly do together much better than we could do independently. Out of that came a lot of good projects, and most of them were accomplished. We haven't gone through a process to see whether or not we indeed share still some concerns that we would address better together. But it's certainly something we've talked about.
Commissioners, I think that's a fabulous idea. It sounds like there's been some work done that way in the past, but even in a normal environment, I think it would be a great idea to share strategic plans with your other units of government, the cities, townships, all of units that have strategic plans, even those that don't, sharing with them what the county is focused on, because I think you have those opportunities to say, hey, that one sounds a lot like this one of ours over here. How can we work together? And there we've achieved, even just knowing what's important. The same things are important for the county and the city and the school district. You can imagine many opportunities to work at lower costs and better outcomes.
I'd like already doing that on goal 3 with our economic development task force.
I'd like to say something relative to the equity question. I think we've talked about making sure that everybody has an equal voice, but I would like to see in our strategic plan that equity is included when we look at policy development and the kind of goals that we have.
Very good, thank you. Okay, shall we go down to goal 2? This was that goal that was kind of right in the heart and soul of what county government's all about. Any additional discussion on the objectives there? Those are broadband, optimize residents' health and safety, protect and enhance the natural resources.
Are there other technologies other than broadband that we need to be mentioning? I am not techie enough to know.
I think broadband is the biggest issue. And it reminds me, when we, back not too many years ago, believe it or not, had areas where basically issues with whether or not there was adequate electric service coming into certain areas. And obviously it had been sort of put to the side. And here again, we have areas that really and truly need broadband. And there's no real plan in place. Don, maybe you can contribute to this that I'm aware of that gets us there.
Do we still need to mention electricity, or has that one been covered?
No, rural electrification took care of that.
Any other infrastructure stuff that we need to mention along with the broadband?
Homelessness. A lot of folks don't have access to even simple things because of the homeless issue, which has only gotten worse. And so I think there are a lot of basics like that we still need to work on. We also have to be concerned with the record unemployment, how that might affect folks that maybe did have opportunities and resources that may not have them, and how we as a county can work with them and ease that. But I don't really know what to do about it.
I think the real strength here is other communities have been dealing with this, have dealt with it, are still dealing with it. The Twin Cities has a pretty forward looking and thinking broadband strategy to address some of that concern that if you don't have a house or a place that you consistently call home, how do you get broadband service to that segment of our population? And in this economic environment, I think looking at some of those solutions makes sense. A very traditional one, but a forward-thinking traditional one is listed as one of the bullet points: initiate the one-stop construction plan. So whenever there's construction happening, fiber's being installed, and we don't have to go back and do it at higher cost.
Supervisor Maury, I see that your video and mic are on. Did you want to make a comment?
I would just suggest that everything in Goal 2 is being addressed by the County Broadband Committee, and we're working very hard to establish border-to-border access to broadband. So I think we have brought a lot of partners to the table, and we are seeking innovative solutions and looking at best practices elsewhere. We're meeting again this week, and I think there'll be one or two projects coming out of the work of that committee that will at least expand access on the county level.
Do we have a time frame of those projects?
Because of the expense of extending broadband to rural residents and under the current technology, fiber to the door is still the Cadillac, but it's very expensive. We really need to look at applying for grants. There's a state broadband grant, there's USDA grants, there's some rural development money coming from the COVID-19. But that's one thing that we're really looking at this week in terms of potential funding sources and grants. Timeline, the state grant, for example, is not probably not till later in this year, October, November deadline.
We heard about some of that work, and that is all very good work. I think including it in a strategic plan just supports and emphasizes the importance of that work. And so as the county's thinking about where do we spend our time, efforts, energy, it could very well be in helping seek some of those grants and looking for other funding sources, and how can we support the work of that task force.
Rob, could I ask a clarifying question? Are these goals in order of importance from objective 1 to objective 3? Is there a priority here at all?
Ultimately, that is and should be your call. I think we put them in order that reflected a rough priority. I mean, it's hard to say that any of these are not important, but I think putting economic development down as goal 3 maybe did reflect that. We know that's important, but we also know that these other two probably rise a little.
Because getting at the basic needs for individuals, which many of us have spoke of several times, I take nothing against broadband, but I think that equity in health and now I'm losing the objective here. Residents' health and safety would be to me, and water quality would be to me higher objectives than broadband as far as making equity for all and starting there and working on affordable housing and improving accessibility to all of our residents.
I would like to add my voice to the concerns about homelessness, and I guess I would also add poverty. When I was calling constituents during my campaign, I asked what issues they were most concerned about, and those two were stated by most of the people that had input for me. It also is significant since we have gotten the word that Eau Claire and Chippewa Falls are number 2 in the rate of poverty after Milwaukee.
Right. And certainly
Is the
now
word poverty even used?
yes.
Not in the strategic plan though, correct? I don't
Oh.
see it.
Didn't see it.
Oh, excuse me.
I think that ought to be added. Because yeah, homelessness is a piece of that, but there's a lot that goes well beyond that.
Mhm. Well, and homelessness can be a result of poverty. Poverty contributes to the health issues that are listed under the strategies. It's a social determinant of health.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree with Supervisor Coffey on in the comments she made. Rob, I'd ask you again, is this an order of importance of how these are ranked? Did we get an answer to that? Hello?
I think he did answer that. He said that this was what they start out with, but the actual priorities would be determined by the board, would be part of their responsibility.
That's my understanding. Thank you.
Yeah.
Seems to me we're saying that a person needs to have a decent paycheck, a roof over their head, and food in their stomach before they're going to be real interested in getting on broadband. So I think one of the things we ought to be thinking about is priorities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And I would also add that poverty and homelessness may be one of those root causes of the opioid epidemic and the methamphetamine crisis that is causing such a burden to the citizens as well as our county.
Well, interestingly enough, I think that really part of our strategy here is to improve data sharing. And we say, what is the data telling us? And if we look at those particular issues and how they impact the community, whether that is the use of opioids or whether it's poverty, the data is telling us what we need to do. The Alice report certainly does.
Supervisors, I think that we have lost Rob. I'm looking at the participant list and he's not on our list anymore.
This is Frank Drexler.
Thank you, Frank.
If I may, I want to comment a little bit on some of the points here. I made the change already to consider moving up the second objective for goal 2 to first. I think it's, from what you had indicated, we need to do that. Many of the words you talked about, the concerns of homelessness, poverty, unemployment, those were all brought up in the different meetings. They were in the earlier drafts of this strategic plan. They were almost too many to list. And we thought that it would actually be tactics. So when the county board comes up with the objectives and the staff and departments work on the strategies and the tactics, we'll work on ways to improve the citizens' lives. And that includes improving homelessness and putting roofs over their heads. And so I think some of those words will come in the next round and we see the tactics. I've taken all this down, all good comments. Some of them be stated in the strategies there, but for sure they will be in the tactics. So sorry if I interrupted, and you continue with your discussion and providing, that's all good info.
Thank you for your input. I'm at this point, supervisors, I'm watching the clock and realizing that we have devoted about a half an hour to this discussion. I'd like to limit it I had asked Rob to spend no more than half an hour. So that didn't work. So at this point, I'd like to ask Administrator Schaaf to give us the directions in regard to where we go from here with this.
Yes, I can do that. Oh,
I am back, guys. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, hi, Rob.
so Rob,
I tried to draw to a close, Rob. Sorry.
Yeah, it didn't go poof at a half an hour, so it was something else. But
yeah.
Anyway.
So our next steps will be we're going to take all of the comments tonight. We had multiple people taking notes from the conversation. We will bring those and put those back into the objective plan. And then we'll be bringing the plan back to the Board of Supervisors through the Committee on Administration. You'll see it again next month at your meeting. And at that point, we will have gotten input from department managers as well regarding tactics. So you'll start to see how we're envisioning giving this plan actual implementation ability. So we'll have some more back and forth with this. Rob, would you like to add anything else to the process at this point from how you're viewing this?
Yeah, I think this is a really important process, and I know that the administration team is really wants to make sure that it's not presented as a data company. Obviously, we've done some work here and we've tried to narrow things down, but we want your engagement. We want and need your engagement as well as that of the departments. And I think thinking about how we use Speak Your Piece as kind of part of the process now, it goes back to the community too. We're not going to go back and ask them to hold more meetings. We can't do that anyway. But, I think once we get a plan in place, that would be how we roll it out. Right now, just your input and that of the department is really.
Schneider question about the process. When we see it a month from now, will we be voting it up or down in its entirety, or will there be more time for tweaking it?
We're going to see it more than once before that June 16th meeting. But to answer your question, I think the intention is that we would come to some final point in the June 16th meeting. So in other words, there's a lot of work that can go on, feedback from all of you into the process. In the meanwhile, so I don't want to give the impression that it'll all come to you on the night before the 16th and you'll have to vote on it. It's not going to be that way.
Chair Smyer? Oh.
Yes.
As we go ahead and are developing the tactics, etc., will we be adding any evaluation criteria?
That'll be part of, so when you look at what we're trying to do is we're trying to pull together the different pieces of this, and you will have the tactics, the evaluation criteria, as well as some of the information on what it's going to take to actually be sort of that input into getting something done is going to be are going to be components of what we will have as we discuss budget. What this really becomes is a work plan. And so a little bit to Supervisor Schneider's point, this isn't a stagnant document. It will be a work plan that the board in collaboration with staff and other community partners will continue to work on. And so as we work through the next 2 years, it gives us that blueprint to start with. So we agree on where we're going to go, and then we update it as we go.
And I would emphasize that's why we really want your input on those big ticket items, if you will, the goals and the strategies. I'm sorry, the goals and the objectives. Strategies are important there, but it's those are probably going to change from the year as conditions change. But objectives and strategies should be pretty durable.
Thank you.
Excuse me. I'm wondering if we can add one word on goal 2. where we have enhanced communities and quality of citizens' lives. In order to make that a little broader, could we say enhance equity, community, and quality of citizens' lives? Is that a better way to say what we're looking for?
I'll say amen to that.
I agree.
Put that into the hopper.
I just wanted to chime in and go back to Colleen's comment on the Shared Services Committee and look what is launching again, according to what Colleen mentioned earlier, the COVID committee with Greg Moore and Jeff Bonnet. Pay attention to some of the things that they're coming to as we're looking at our options here. I really hope we're able to get back to a broad shared services group, and I think that committee could be a launching pad to get them back together.
I can speak to that. I've taken the responsibility of attempting to reconstitute that committee. The problem is that it's not our committee. It was a joint committee involving other entities. So it will take a cooperative venture. The Shared Services Committee, as it existed before, no longer exists. So I've taken the responsibility to reconstruct the committee along the lines that we've discussed tonight. So I hope that you will hear about that in the very near future. And I've already spoken with persons at the school board, the city of Eau Claire, the city of Altoona. I'm looking at a wider group for a new shared services committee. In fact, we may call it something slightly different.
And actually, as we look at the really root issues that we're looking at as being so important to change, there's no way any one entity is going to take on that task alone. You are going to have partnerships. It isn't as though we've got a corner on poverty or a corner on homelessness. We don't. It's in our townships, it's in our county, to say the least, and it's in our cities. So, again, I think it's going to be really important to realize that the amount of work you've got outlined here is a plan that can only succeed on these big issues, I think, unless we really do have partnerships.
Supervisor Cronk, may I speak, Chairman Smeyer?
Briefly, I'm trying to draw this to a close.
Thank you.
So
Thank
briefly,
you.
please.
I just want to second, third, fourth, and fifth that I just really appreciate Chairman Smeyer, you kind of initiating that or doing that work to get that group back together. Because we're such a service provider at the county, we're almost sometimes at the mercy of all of the other partnerships we're having to invest in the services that we provide. So we need the right arm to know what the left arm is doing and be able to collaborate together. So I so appreciate that. How do we give input in between when we get sort of the updated documents if we have more input on this, such as maybe reviewing what wasn't met from the last strategic plan and perhaps wanting to add some goals that maybe weren't met that are still valid from the last strategic plan into this one?
I think there's a feedback survey going out. Rob, is that right?
Yes, everyone will be getting an electronic survey through their email where you can give us very specific comments on each of the steps here, as well as add information like just talking about supervisor.
Okay, thank you very much. Supervisors, I'm going to assume at this point that we've reached an end point for this meeting, and therefore, having accomplished our purposes in this meeting, I am adjourning the meeting.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and Eau Claire County. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.